Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey Hussle grew up in South Central Los Angeles, in the Crenshaw district, where gang activity, poverty, and limited opportunities shaped almost every part of daily life. By his teens, he was already connected to the Rollin' 60s Crips, something he later said was less about wanting to be a gangster and more about survival and finding a way to earn money for studio time. Music was always the end goal. His first real break came when he released Slossin' Boy Volume 1 in 2005, which started building a local buzz. That local movement grew fast. Nip was dropping tapes like Bullets Ain't Got No Name and building a loyal fanbase directly out of Crenshaw. Unlike a lot of artists who came from similar environments, Nipsey focused heavily on ownership. He studied business, started his own label, All Money In, and refused traditional deals early on because he didn't want to lose control of his work. His approach caught the attention of bigger artists. He linked with Snoop Dogg, collaborated with Drake, and built a long-term relationship with Atlantic Records later in his career. When Victory Lap dropped in 2018, it wasn't just another debut album. It was the result of over a decade of groundwork. Victory Lap went Grammy-nominated and officially solidified Nipsey as one of the most respected artists coming out of the West Coast in years. Outside of music, Nipsey was becoming a major figure in his community. He invested in businesses around Crenshaw, opened the Marathon clothing store, funded tech programs for youth, worked on job creation, supported STEM programs, and openly pushed against the cycle of violence he grew up in. His whole goal was to show kids in his area that there were real alternatives to the street life. On March 31st, 2019, Nipsey was outside his Marathon store when he got into a brief argument with Eric Holder, someone he knew from the neighborhood. Nipsey allegedly told him there were rumors going around about him cooperating with law enforcement, a serious accusation in their environment. Holder left, came back minutes later, and shot Nipsey multiple times, then kicked him before running off. Nipsey died shortly after from the injuries. Holder was later arrested, found guilty, and sentenced to 60 years to life in prison. Nipsey's death hit the entire hip-hop world hard. It wasn't just the loss of a rapper, it was the loss of someone who was actively trying to rebuild the place that raised him. Even today, Crenshaw still treats Nipsey like more than an artist. He's remembered as someone who tried to shift the path for an entire generation, growing up where he once stood. Juice WRLD. Juice WRLD's rise happened fast, but the roots of everything he became started way earlier than people realize. He grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago, raised mostly by his mom, and he was always surrounded by music, rock, rap, emo, everything. By middle school, he was already experimenting with pills and lean, heavily influenced by the artists he listened to at the time. He talked openly about how Future's early mixtapes were the first thing that made him curious about sipping lean when he was only 11 or 12. By high school, Juice was freestyling constantly. That was his real superpower. He could freestyle full songs for minutes straight without stopping. When he dropped Lucid Dreams in 2017, the song didn't just get attention because it was catchy. It hit because it sounded like something new in the middle of the SoundCloud era. Emotional, melodic, but still rap. And the Cole Bennett video stamped it as one of the songs of that generation. Once that song blew up, everything snowballed. Juice started working with huge artists immediately. Future, Travis Scott, Young Thug, and he handled it like he'd been doing it for years. The talent was real, and he was dropping hits nonstop. All Girls Are the Same, Lean With Me, Robbery, Legends. His fan base connected with him in a way most artists never experienced because he didn't hide anything. His battles with anxiety, addiction, heartbreak, he said it all directly in the music. But the same honesty that made him loved is what made his situation so tragic. Juice had been struggling with addiction since he was a kid. And even though he tried to get clean multiple times, the habit always came back. People close to him said he was planning to start rehab just 2 weeks before everything happened. On December 8th, 2019, Juice and his team landed in Chicago on a private jet. What they didn't know was that federal agents were already waiting for them because someone tipped off authorities about guns and drugs supposedly being on the plane. When officers boarded the jet, they found drugs, weapons, and immediately tried to control the scene. Multiple people on Juice's team later said he had taken several pills right before law enforcement came on board, trying not to get caught with them. Not long after, Juice went into a seizure. Emergency meds were given, he was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead shortly afterward, at just 21 years old. The official cause was an accidental overdose. What makes it even heavier is that Juice had released the song Legends a year earlier, a track about losing his friends too young. and in it he literally said, "What's the 27 club? We ain't making it past 21." It was one of those lines that didn't feel real until it was too late. Juice may not have been here long, but his impact is massive. The melodic rap wave, the emo-influenced songwriting, the freestyle culture he inspired, all of that still lives through a generation of artists who came after him. And his fans still treat him as someone who was more than just another big artist. They talk about him like someone who changed something in them. XXXTentacion. X's rise was one of the fastest and most chaotic the internet had ever seen. Before the world knew him as a global chart topper, X was just another kid from Broward County, bouncing between couches, dealing with legal problems, and trying to make music that sounded nothing like what anyone else was doing. His breakout came from Look at Me, a raw, blown-out, aggressive track that spread across SoundCloud and Twitter because of how loud and distorted it was. It wasn't polished. It felt like a punch in the face. And that energy made X impossible to ignore. But X wasn't just known for the music. Early in his career, he was surrounded by a lot of controversy. Fights, arrests, and a messy legal case that followed him everywhere. That made him a polarizing figure. Some people saw him as talented but troubled, while others saw him as someone they couldn't support at all. At the same time, he was building a fan base that treated him almost like a cult leader. His supporters connected deeply with the emotional side of his music, especially when he shifted away from his aggressive style. That shift started with the release of his album 17 in 2017. Instead of rage-filled tracks, he dropped songs like Jocelyn Flores, which dealt with grief, depression, and mental health in a way most rappers didn't talk about publicly at the time. As his sound evolved, other artists took notice. J. Cole publicly praised his honesty, and Kanye West later called him one of the most impactful artists of his generation. Behind the scenes, people close to X said he was genuinely trying to grow up, fix the things he'd done wrong, and become a better version of himself. By 2018, X was bigger than ever. His album debuted at #1, and songs like Sad became huge. His image softened, his fanbase kept growing, and he finally seemed to be finding some peace, until the day everything came to a stop. On June 18th, 2018, X visited Riva Motorsports in Deerfield Beach, Florida. While he was leaving the parking lot, an SUV pulled in front of him and blocked his car. Multiple men got out, armed, and demanded what he had. They took his Louis Vuitton bag, which reportedly had cash inside, and as they walked away, one of the gunmen turned around and shot him multiple times. X was rushed to the hospital but didn't survive. He was only 20 years old. Over the next few months, police arrested 4 men connected to the robbery. All of them were eventually convicted, with the shooter receiving a life sentence. The footage, the planning, and the motive, all of it pointed to a robbery that turned into a murder for no reason other than greed. X's legacy is complicated, but his impact is undeniable. In just a few years, he went from a local SoundCloud name to one of the most influential artists of his era. Even today, his fans treat his music like a time capsule of emotion they don't get from many other artists. And whether people loved him or hated him, almost everyone agrees the story ended way too early. Pop Smoke. Pop Smoke didn't start out trying to be a rapper. In 2018, he was just hanging out in the studio with his friend Jay Guapo. And when Jay knocked out mid-session, Pop got bored, got on the mic, and tried rapping for fun. The energy was crazy, and that moment accidentally kicked off his entire music career. He quickly linked up with producer Rico Beats, who later introduced him to Steven Victor, the founder of Victor Victor Worldwide, and a major figure inside good music. Victor signed Pop almost immediately. From there, Pop locked in with UK drill producer 808 Mello, and that combination created a whole new movement. Brooklyn drill with UK-style production, but Pop's deep, aggressive voice on top of it. Welcome to the Party and Dior were the first 2 songs that really showed people he wasn't just another local artist. His voice, his cadence, the beats, everything felt new. He dropped Meet the Woo, then Meet the Woo 2. And in barely a year, he went from unknown to the entire face of New York's drill scene. People were comparing him to 50 Cent because of how fast the rise was and how naturally he carried that star energy. But Pop was still only 20, still learning the business, still living fast, and one mistake changed everything. In February 2020, while staying at an Airbnb in Los Angeles, he posted photos on Instagram. One of the bags in the pic had the full address visible. Hours later, a group of teens saw the leaked address and decided to rob the house. They broke in around 4 a.m. Pop was in the shower. In the chaos of the robbery, they shot him. The shooter was a 15-year-old kid. Pop Smoke didn't get a chance to reach his peak. He was just getting started. But even with that short run, his sound reshaped Brooklyn drill and influenced a whole new wave of artists. His voice, his energy, and his impact still echo across hip-hop today. Mac Miller. Mac Miller grew up in Pittsburgh, and from a young age he was obsessed with music. He learned multiple instruments as a kid, messed around with beats, and by the time he hit high school, he was already recording under the name Easy Mac. He wasn't built off viral moments or controversy. He built everything through mixtapes, local shows, and pure work. When he dropped Kids in 2010, it spread way beyond Pittsburgh. Songs like Nikes on My Feet and Kool-Aid and Frozen Pizza made him one of the first big faces of the early YouTube rap era. Once he signed with Rostrum Records, the same label that launched Wiz Khalifa, his career moved fast. Blue Slide Park dropped in 2011 and became the first independently distributed debut album to hit #1 on the Billboard 200 in over 15 years. That moment proved he wasn't just a mixtape rapper. He was a real force in hip-hop. At the same time, Mac was dealing with a private battle that kept showing up in his music. He struggled with depression and addiction, especially lean and pills, and he never sugarcoated it. Albums like Watching Movies with the Sound Off and Faces showed how deep those issues ran. Faces especially became a cult classic because of how brutally honest it was. It was basically Mac documenting everything he was trying to escape. By 2016 to 2018, Mac had completely evolved as an artist. The Divine Feminine and Swimming showed a more mature sound, jazz influence, live instrumentation, introspective writing, and had critics calling him one of the most improved artists of the decade. Swimming earned him a Grammy nomination, and people felt like Mac had finally reached the version of himself he'd been trying to grow into. But behind the progress, the struggle never fully left. In September 2018, Mac's assistant found him unresponsive in his home after he had taken pills that were unknowingly laced with fentanyl. The mix of fentanyl, cocaine, and alcohol took his life at only 26 years old. A full investigation revealed that the dealer who sold him the pills knew they were fake, and multiple people were later arrested and sentenced because of it. Mac's death was one of the hardest losses for fans because everyone watched his growth in real time. From the kid in Pittsburgh with the flip cam to a deeply respected artist who kept reinventing himself. Even now, projects like Swimming in Circles feel like snapshots of a man who was trying to heal, trying to figure things out, and trying to push music somewhere new. Tupac Shakur. Tupac's story started long before the fame. He grew up surrounded by activism. His mother, Afeni Shakur, was part of the Black Panther Party, and that shaped how he viewed the world. He studied acting, poetry, and performing at the Baltimore School for the Arts, which is where he really learned how to channel emotion into art. Pac wasn't just a rapper, he was trained as a full-on performer. His career first moved through Digital Underground, then into his solo debut, then classic albums like Me Against the World and All Eyes on Me. Pac's music blended street reality, political commentary, and emotional vulnerability. He could drop something aggressive like Hit 'Em Up, then make something deeply introspective like Dear Mama. That duality is why people still say he's the greatest. But Pac's life also moved fast. Legal issues, protests, run-ins with the media, and eventually the East Coast versus West Coast tension made him one of the most polarizing figures in hip-hop. Death Row Records, run by Suge Knight, became his new home after he signed the deal from prison. Once Pac got out, he worked non-stop, shooting movies, recording music, and trying to build his own label, Machiavelli Records. On September 7th, 1996, Pac was in Las Vegas with Suge Knight, heading to a Mike Tyson fight. Earlier that night, Pac and his crew got into a fight with a Southside Crip named Orlando Anderson inside the MGM Grand. Hours later, while driving down Flamingo Road, a white Cadillac pulled up next to Pac and Suge and opened fire. Pac was hit multiple times and died 6 days later. For almost 3 decades, nobody was officially arrested. Conspiracy theories became part of Pac's legacy. It wasn't until 2023 that Keith D, a gang member connected to the Southside Crips, was finally arrested in connection with the shooting. Even with that, questions still remain about what led to the moment and who else may have played a role. Pac's influence never dipped. His voice, his ideas, and the stamp he left on culture outlived him. His music is still everywhere, and his name is still mentioned anytime someone talks about greatness in hip-hop. The Notorious B.I.G. Biggie grew up in Brooklyn, raised mostly by his mother, Valletta Wallace. From a young age, he was known for his storytelling. As a kid, he was freestyling on street corners and block parties, turning everyday struggle into bars. But Biggie's early life wasn't easy. He dropped out of school, got into the streets, and was arrested several times before he ever saw a studio. A demo he made for fun eventually ended up in the hands of Sean Puffy Combs, who was at Uptown Records at the time. Puffy immediately saw the potential. When he got fired and started Bad Boy Records, Biggie came with him. His debut album Ready to Die changed East Coast rap. Biggie's flow was effortless, his wordplay was sharp, and his storytelling was detailed in a way that made you picture everything he said. Juicy, Big Papa, and Warning showed the world exactly what kind of artist he was. A once-in-a-generation talent who could rap over any beat and make it sound natural. But the mid-90s also brought the East Coast versus West Coast tension. Biggie and Pac had been friends early on, but Pac getting shot in '94 and blaming members of Bad Boy shifted the relationship into full-on rivalry. Diss tracks, media hype, and the rise of Death Row versus Bad Boy made the tension worse. On March 9th, 1997, after attending a party in Los Angeles, Biggie was riding with his team. At a red light, a car pulled up beside him and fired multiple rounds into his SUV. Biggie was hit 4 times and died shortly after. To this day, his murder remains unsolved, with theories pointing in every direction. Gang retaliation, Suge Knight, LAPD corruption, or people connected to the East-West beef spiraling out of control. Biggie only released 1 album while he was alive, and he's still considered one of the greatest rappers to ever touch a mic. His influence on flow, rhyme schemes, beat selection, and East Coast rap is still felt almost 30 years later.